Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into the dagger-sharp world of medieval assassins. You're hunched under a dripping archway, cloaked in rags that smell like boiled cabbage and something you hope is just mud. A rat skitters past your foot. You've been waiting 8 hours for the castle lights to go out so you can scale a moss-slick wall, avoid a patrol of half-asleep guards, and strangle a baron in his feather-stuffed bed. All because a rival noble promised you a bag of coin and safe passage. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and I'd love to know where you're tuning in from tonight. Drop your city and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You'd think being an assassin in medieval Europe might have some perks, mystique, power, maybe even wealth. But no, it mostly involves paranoia, poverty, and a lot of time hiding in sewage trenches. First of all, there's no job security. Kings might promise pardons, nobles might pledge gold, but everyone forgets those promises once the body hits the floor. You're disposable, always. A tool to be used and then quietly disposed of. Unlike mercenaries or soldiers, assassins weren't protected by any kind of code or honor system. You couldn't brag about your work. You couldn't form a guild. And if you got caught, well, let's just say no one was going to rescue you from the oubliette. Most assassins died young, killed during a job, executed after betrayal, or simply vanished into the fog one night, never to be heard from again. Some did it for politics, others for coin, a rare few out of a twisted sense of justice. But all had one thing in common: no clear way out. Retiring wasn't really an option. You couldn't settle down, buy a little cottage, and take up knitting. The moment you stopped running jobs, someone from your past, an old employer, a rival assassin, or the son of that merchant you accidentally eliminated, might come looking. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins operated as part of tight-knit secret orders or more like freelancers, skulking alone through shadowy backstreets. You've probably heard of the legendary assassination. Yes, that's the origin of the word assassin, active in the Middle East during the Crusades. But in Europe, things were far less glamorous. No mountain strongholds, no garden retreats. You got a knife, maybe a change of clothes, and a vague instruction whispered over wine. That vagueness was part of the misery. Orders were always half-coded with layers of plausible deniability. If things went wrong, your employer could claim ignorance and toss you to the wolves, literally in some cases. Remember, this is an era where executions were a form of public entertainment. If you got caught, your punishment might include being drawn and quartered, boiled alive, or sewn into a sack with wild animals. To make matters worse, travel was painfully slow. Say your target's in a castle 3 counties over. Better start walking, alone, on muddy roads, through bandit territory, with a pack of stale bread and maybe a stolen chicken. And no, you don't get a horse. Horses are for knights, not night-crawling murderers with trust issues. The psychological toll was brutal too. You couldn't trust anyone. You couldn't speak freely. You had to live in a constant state of deception. Even other criminals didn't like you much. Cut purses and smugglers might rob the rich, But assassins crossed an unspoken line. Taking a life wasn't just illegal, it was deeply taboo, soaked in religious fear and moral disgust. If you confessed your sins in church, the priest might gasp and refuse absolution. That's if he didn't report you first. Then there's the paperwork. Well, the medieval version. False identities, fake letters, bribed messengers, misleading trail markers. You spent more time trying to look innocent than actually doing the job. And don't forget, one badly worded letter, intercepted by a suspicious monk, could mean the gallows. A fringe account even describes a 14th century assassin who carried a hollowed-out prayer book filled with poison vials, maps, and a retractable needle. Sounds clever, until you realize someone probably caught him at a monastery and asked him to lead grace. Most damning of all, even success didn't bring glory. You couldn't bask in your accomplishments. There were no victory parades for a silent killer. You were a shadow, a whisper, a faceless scapegoat when things went south. Best case scenario, you finished the job, got paid in silver, and fled before anyone noticed. Worst case, you were blamed for everything, hunted across half the kingdom, and turned into a cautionary tale told to children. No songs, no statues, no stories with your name on them. Just silence, suspicion, and if you were really unlucky, a shallow grave behind the privy. And let's talk about the gear, or rather the glaring lack of it. You imagine assassins as sleek silhouettes, cloaked in dark leathers, blades strapped expertly to wrists, vanishing into the mist like bedtime smoke. But in the real Middle Ages, your tools are more butcher's apprentice than stealthy mastermind. You carry a rusty dagger, a cheese knife filed to a point, maybe a short cudgel, or if you're fancy, a garrote made from old horsehair and gut string. Basically, you're MacGyvering a murder kit using whatever's lying around in the stables. Your go-bag is a worn satchel containing dried peas, a leaky water skin, and a few noxious herbs. Someone's grandmother once swore would stop a man's heart in 10 steps, though no one could remember how many leaves to use. Historians still argue whether certain assassins used a signature weapon, or if the lack of evidence just reflects how utterly unprepared most of them were. Now imagine trying to kill a well-fed noble in his sleep, using a dagger that bends slightly to the left and smells like moldy turnips. You tiptoe in, holding your breath, footfalls muffled by stolen church linens wrapped around your boots. One creak of the floorboards, and the whole place erupts in chaos. That's if you get to the bedroom at all. More often, you're intercepted by dogs, guards, or some drunk servant trying to relieve himself in the hallway. And heaven help you if your target's armored. That shining mail shirt, completely resistant to your butter knife, you'd have more luck bashing him with a chamber pot, which oddly enough has been documented once. An assassin in Milan supposedly smothered a minor bishop by pushing his head into one. So yes, in medieval assassination, improvisation was key and humiliating. Then there's poison, your supposed ace in the hole. Except medieval poison wasn't exactly lab tested. It came from folk recipes, gossip, and herbs that may or may not just cause vomiting. Want to use hemlock? Great. Just make sure it's not actually wild parsley. Monk's hood? Lovely if your hands don't blister from handling it. You might spend weeks fermenting a so-called lethal potion, only for it to taste like spicy vinegar and cause your target mild indigestion. And delivering the poison? Oh, that's the real fun. You have to bribe a cook, sneak into the kitchen, or tamper with the wine cask during a feast, all without being noticed by a dozen busy servants, the steward, and a hound that's way too curious about your pocketful of powder. One 13th century chronicler tells of an assassin who tried to poison a duke's favorite pigeon. Not a euphemism, a literal pigeon. The man figured the bird would share its treat with its master. The duke, however, gave the pigeon to a servant boy, who died 3 days later. And suddenly, the entire castle was on lockdown, with every bird plucked and every cook tortured. Of course, if you preferred more hands-on methods, you were in for a different sort of suffering. Blades dull quickly, especially if you're cheap or poor. Your tools might snap mid-thrust, bend awkwardly against bone, or get stuck in thick clothing. And you're not immune to injury either. Miss a strike, and you risk getting head-butted, screamed at, or thrashed with a brass candlestick. Sometimes you'd be sent to kill someone in broad daylight at a market or church gathering. Now that's a real crowd pleaser. You get one shot, usually a fast stab and an even faster getaway. No dramatic monologues, no eye contact, and no guarantee you're even stabbing the right person, which is a terrifyingly common problem in the records. One killer was reportedly executed for murdering the wrong merchant, who just happened to wear the same hat. And then there were booby-trapped targets. Paranoid nobles liked to rig doors, bedchambers, even their wardrobes. You might climb through a second-story window only to fall through a rotten floorboard or find yourself locked inside a chest used for airing linens. In one fringe account from a German folktale, an assassin tried hiding under a feast table, only to be discovered when a noblewoman's dog wouldn't stop barking at the wiggling pile of legs. Still sound glamorous? Even if you made it out, odds were good that your weapon, bloodied, broken, or just suspiciously sticky, would get you caught. Few assassins had forges or gear maintenance kits. You couldn't pop down to the local smith and ask for your assassin tools to be sharpened without raising a few eyebrows. So you were left relying on your own shaky handiwork. It's like trying to perform surgery with a soup spoon and an apology. Some fringe sources claim that traveling monks were occasionally used as cover by assassins, smuggling blades inside walking sticks or concealing poisoned pins within their crosses. But again, those tales usually end in failure. The moment your blade is dull, your vial spills, or you sneeze at the wrong moment, well, congratulations. You're now the court's newest entertainment, because if you're caught, oh, they won't just kill you. You'll be interrogated first, which, in medieval terms, means slowly dismantled with the hope that you'll spill who hired you, where they are, and how many others are coming. And guess what? Most nobles suspected you were just the tip of a much darker iceberg. So even if you had no employer, you'd still be accused of being part of some invisible network of paid killers. And that was often the final insult. All this misery, this horror, this craftwork of death, and still, people thought of you as just another tool, not clever, not skilled, just expendable. Of course, you didn't become an assassin because of a prestigious education. There were no medieval colleges offering advanced backstabbing or introduction to stealth. No one handed you a scroll and said, "Congratulations, you're now certified in silent murder." You learned by doing. and failing, and probably bleeding a little. Training? What training? If you were lucky, you got picked up by someone who already walked this twisted path, a disgraced mercenary, a jaded thief, maybe a former squire with a grudge and a set of questionable ethics. They'd teach you just enough to stay alive, how to pick a lock with a chicken bone, how to move without your ankles cracking, how to slip something bitter into a goblet without getting noticed. But most of it was guesswork. You practiced stabbing sacks of flour behind barns. You shadowed targets from a distance and mimicked their gait to blend in. You spent hours crouched behind hedges just to learn how not to make a sound when your knees popped. And when that failed, you stuffed moss into your boots and hoped no one noticed you waddling like a duck. Even basic anatomy was fuzzy at best. You think stabbing under the ribs is lethal. You hope the neck artery is on the left. Historians still argue whether assassins received any kind of reliable anatomical instruction, or if they simply relied on superstition, prayer, and trial by blood. There's at least one recorded case of a would-be killer trying to strangle a knight through his helmet. It did not end well. Then there's the physical conditioning, or again, the lack thereof. You weren't training on castle battlements with a swordmaster. You were climbing up haylofts, scaling crumbling walls, and sprinting barefoot across frozen fields with dogs chasing behind. Injuries were constant. A twisted ankle meant you couldn't escape. A sore shoulder meant your dagger hand shook at the wrong moment. And God's help you if you got sick, because assassins didn't get sick days. If you were sent to poison a bishop's stew during a bout of dysentery, you just clenched and prayed. And while we're at it, what's with the food? You're sneaking around at night, avoiding guards, planning kills, and living off boiled barley and moldy bread. Maybe a stolen apple if you're lucky. Definitely nothing with protein. No wonder you shake during stabbings. Your diet is closer to monastic penance than elite operative. Some accounts even suggest that assassins carried dried garlic and vinegar-soaked cloths, not as tools, but as desperate attempts to ward off illness and curses. Doesn't sound very professional, does it? And the mental toll was just as steep. You had to memorize fake names, forged backstories, escape routes through towns you'd never seen before. You were alone most of the time, even when surrounded by people, always acting, always calculating, always pretending not to exist. Paranoia wasn't just a side effect. It was the job description. Some would-be assassins actually failed in their first assignment and simply ran away, changed their identity, shaved their head, joined a monastery, or tried to. At least one tale tells of a fugitive assassin becoming a monk in France, only to be recognized by his voice years later when he started muttering in his sleep. The monastery turned him in for a bucket of silver and a side of forgiveness. And of course, no matter how skilled you became, there was always something new to trip you up. A dog that didn't bark, a lock that had been changed, a servant who stayed up late polishing silver. No amount of training could prepare you for that. It wasn't like you could Google how to break into a second-story window without waking the cat. You had to rely on instinct and crossed fingers. There were fringe theories, some quite popular at the time, that certain assassins used supernatural training. They rubbed bat's blood into their eyes for night vision, or performed rituals on new moons to gain silent feet. One 12th century tale swears that a female assassin in Burgundy could hypnotize guards with a lullaby. Another claims a killer trained by witches could disappear into shadow. Probably more wishful thinking than reality, but those legends stuck. Not because they were true, but because everyone wanted to believe that assassins were more than just desperate men and women with shaking hands and dull knives. It made the fear more manageable. You weren't being hunted by someone like you. You were being stalked by something other. But truthfully, you were just a kid from a bad village, or a runaway apprentice, or someone who lost their family in a raid and decided the only way forward was through shadows and steel. You didn't have elite training. You had bruises, bad knees, and a growing list of regrets. You also didn't have time to rest. Every job came with a deadline, sometimes days, sometimes hours, and every deadline came with a promise. Do it fast, do it clean, or don't come back at all. And still, you practiced. You stabbed straw mannequins and murmured apologies to empty air. You rehearsed your lies until they became truths. You taught your heartbeat to slow at the sound of boots on stone. Because even if no one trained you, you had to become the job. Or you'd die pretending. Of course, none of your paltry training prepares you for them. The nobles. The ones with the velvet sleeves, the jeweled daggers they never use, and the insufferable habit of whispering murder over wine as though it's just another errand. You don't work for kings or queens, not directly. No, they're far too clean for the likes of you. You serve the people who lurk just under the crown. Scheming lords, paranoid barons, disgraced knights, and ambitious dukes with more enemies than candles at their feasts. They don't find you in dark taverns, by the way. They summon you, or send word through a chain of terrified intermediaries. A leather scroll tucked into a chicken crate, a coin hidden beneath a prayer candle, a boy who doesn't blink when he says, "You are to meet the falcon at the river bend." And if that doesn't sound dramatic enough, don't worry. They always make it worse. The falcon turns out to be a pockmarked viscount in a fur-trimmed cloak, shivering beneath a willow tree as he outlines your mission between gulps of watered-down claret. His cousin, he says, is plotting against him, or maybe his steward, or his wife. He doesn't care who dies first. But he does care that it happens before next Tuesday, when guests arrive from Artois. You have 4 days. You ask about payment. He offers you a sack of coins, silver if you're lucky, copper if he thinks you look desperate, which, let's face it, you do. But he also offers something else: protection, safe passage, a letter of pardon, a name change, things you can't buy in any market, the kind of things that make you say yes, even though you know he'll forget your name the moment his cousin stops breathing. And don't think these noble clients are calm and collected. They're the most paranoid, impatient, irrational people you'll ever meet. You show up 2 days early with news, and they panic, thinking you've been followed. You arrive late, and they assume you've betrayed them. They'll order you to murder someone, and then send a second assassin to watch you do it, just to make sure you don't double-cross them. Historians still debate whether these nobles truly feared their own assassins, or simply found it useful to keep them on edge. One surviving letter from a 14th century count orders his hired killer to report back within a day of the act, lest the sun rise on your replacement. charming. And deadlines? Always absurd. You'll be told to infiltrate a fortress on the other side of the province by nightfall, or eliminate a target during a public sermon without causing a scene. One viscount in Gascony apparently ordered an assassination during a wedding, and not just any wedding, but his daughter's. You were expected to slip through the revelers, find the groom's brother, or maybe it was the uncle, details were fuzzy, and remove him without disturbing the roast goose. Spoiler, you didn't make it to dessert. Then there's the matter of double jobs. Your noble client might not tell you that someone else has also been hired. Suddenly, you're lurking in a courtyard, dagger in hand, when another figure steps from the shadows with the same instructions and the same target. Do you team up? Kill each other? Flip a coin? There's no protocol. Just tension, silent nods, and the cold realization that if you do succeed, only one of you is walking away with the coin. Quirkier still, some nobles tried to micromanage their assassinations. They'd draw maps, suggest entry points, and describe exactly how you should do the deed. Slip laudanum into his soup, one duchess instructed, and let him die by sunset so he doesn't spoil the supper atmosphere. You tried to remind her that laudanum hadn't been invented yet. She didn't care. You'd think they'd at least provide resources, maps, disguises, maybe even a bribe or two for gate guards. But no, you're given vague directions, the tower with the red shingles, told to avoid drawing attention, as if that hadn't occurred to you, and occasionally warned not to damage any valuable drapery, because nothing ruins a noble's plot like bloodstains on imported silk. And heaven help you if the target is related to someone important. Nobles loved to forget those little details. You'd slay a rival knight only to discover he was betrothed to the daughter of the king's favorite mistress. Suddenly, you're not just an assassin, you're public enemy number one. But no matter how tangled the politics, you never say no. You can't. These people have long memories, deeper purses, and a network of eyes that reach from manor halls to monastery kitchens. You refuse a job, and next week you might find yourself the new target, hunted by someone with steadier hands and a sharper blade. There's a fringe story of an assassin who tried to escape his contract by fleeing to a monastery in Bohemia. He changed his name, shaved his head, even learned Latin chants. But the noble who hired him? He simply waited a year, and then paid the abbot for his silence. The next monk assigned to clean the chapel just happened to carry a dagger where his crucifix should have been. Because when your client wears silk and signs orders with wax seals, they don't need to kill you themselves. They just have to mention your name to the right person, and suddenly you're being watched by everyone, from stable boys to spice merchants. There's no corner you can hide in, no village far enough, no alias that will hold forever. So you accept the job. Again. And again. You kill fast, you run faster, and you never, ever trust a noble who smiles. The moment your noble client hands you the details, just a name and a vague location, you're already calculating. Because now comes the worst part, the job itself. You have to get in, kill, and improvise. And those first two are hard enough. But it's that last one that really turns your stomach. Nothing ever goes to plan. And deep down, you know that tonight will be no different. You start with travel. not glamorous horseback rides through moonlit forests. No, you're trudging through mud thick as stew, dodging toll guards and plague wagons. You're half-starved, you smell like goat, and your only map is a half-remembered tavern tale about a mill near a crooked elm. By the time you reach the castle or manor or abbey, or whatever overly complex stone prison your target calls home, you're already exhausted. Now comes infiltration. There's no blueprint, just stone walls, sleepy guards, and 24 unpredictable variables. You start by watching. You squat in pig pens. You hunker beneath bridges. You memorize shift changes, door creaks, the way torches flicker in hallways. You even learn which dog barks at rabbits and which one just snores through everything. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins used formal casing routines or relied purely on instinct. But either way, what you're doing is miserable. Your shoes are soaked, your fingers are numb, and the stew you stole from that widow 2 villages back is turning in your gut. Eventually, you find your entry point, maybe an overgrown postern gate or a crumbling garden wall. You count the guards. You pray the cook doesn't decide to have a smoke by the cellar door tonight. You tighten your cloak, pull your hood, and slip into the shadows. It's never smooth. You catch your cloak on a rose bush. A guard sneezes and almost spots you. A cat, curse all cats, rubs against your leg and yowls like it's summoning the devil. Your breath catches, your heart races, and yet somehow no one notices. You move on slower now. Every hallway is a gamble. Then there's the door to your target's chamber. Locked? Of course it's locked. You kneel, fingers shaking, trying to pick it with a bit of twisted bronze or a bone pin. That's if you even brought one. Once, you had to open a door with a stolen fishhook and a spoon. You still don't know how, but let's say you make it in. There's your mark. Snoring, maybe. Or worse, awake, reading by candlelight, wearing a chainmail nightshirt and humming church hymns. Do you rush in? Wait? Poison the goblet on the table and hope he drinks? It's a nightmare buffet of terrible options. One fringe tale tells of an assassin who was forced to improvise mid-mission and smother a noble with his own powdered wig. Another story has someone killing their target with a hurled chessboard. Accidentally. The plan had been poison, but the timing was off. Improvisation is your entire toolkit. And once it's done? No, you don't linger. You don't monologue. You don't even check for a pulse. You're already moving. Back through the corridors, dodging servants, dodging questions, maybe bleeding from a wound you hadn't noticed. Maybe you left something behind, a cloth, a print in the dust. You'll find out later. Or you won't. Escaping is its own torment. The guards are always more alert now. You try not to run, because running means noise, and noise means crossbows. You once read that a crossbow bolt doesn't hurt if it kills you instantly. Unfortunately, most don't. Say you do escape. Say you make it past the stables, the gate, the confused goat blocking the exit. You disappear into the dark, retracing your steps through marshland and manure. You might throw up. You might cry. You definitely won't sleep. And your reward? Hopefully the noble pays. Hopefully it's not a bag full of clipped coins or, worse, a gift instead. One count gave an assassin a carved ivory comb as thanks for killing his brother. Really. You might never get paid at all. Some clients ghost you. Others claim the deed wasn't clean enough, or the target didn't die fast enough, or the tapestries got singed during your escape. One noble complained that the assassin didn't maintain the proper atmosphere of accident. That assassin was later found floating in a pond with a lute shoved into his mouth. Message received. So what do you do after a job? There's no debriefing, no healing tent, just you, cold and covered in someone else's blood, walking through the rain trying not to think about how their eyes looked in those final seconds, or about how your own eyes will look when someone does the same to you. Sometimes, to stay hidden, you impersonate a traveling priest or a mute beggar. You speak in riddles. You sell fake relics. You wear a bandage over your face and say you've taken a vow of silence. You make yourself invisible by being strange, because in this world, no one questions the mad. And even if you made it out alive, someone saw you. They always do. A washerwoman, a groom, a child who couldn't sleep. They don't know what they saw, not yet, but they'll remember. A hood, a limp, the smell of mint, and eventually they'll talk. Because nothing about this job is permanent, except the paranoia. And now we enter the unpredictable, stomach-turning, almost always backfiring world of poisons. The so-called elegant option for medieval assassins. You might think a stealthy killer would relish the art of slow death via cup or crust, but poison is less clean precision and more guesswork with a splash of superstition. And when you're the one mixing the concoction, let's just say you don't want to taste test it. First problem, recipes. There's no apothecary manual labeled Poisons for Quiet Killers, Volume 1. Most of your knowledge comes from rumors, hearsay, or pages torn from dubious herbals. You think belladonna will do the trick, but how many berries? And should they be boiled, crushed, or dried under moonlight while whispering Latin? Historians still argue whether medieval poisoners had reliable, standardized doses or just guessed based on how fast the last victim dropped. Let's say you go with arsenic. It's odorless, tasteless, and slow, like a week of stomach cramps and suspicious burping slow, which is risky if your noble client wanted a more immediate outcome. You try hemlock, but only realize later you picked wild parsley. Now your target has minty breath and is very much not dead. The fringe poisoners, true fringe, experiment with animal parts. Boiled toads, crushed beetles, spider venom mixed with fermented wine. One particularly unhinged method involved soaking rags in decomposing snake flesh and squeezing the liquid into soup. Did it work? Possibly. Did it smell? Oh yes. One monk noted that a noble knight did perish after tasting a broth most foul and strangely warm despite the cook's denial. Delivery is another nightmare. You have to get in without getting caught, then get your potion into the target without anyone noticing. It sounds simple. Slip it into wine, smear it on bread, maybe inject it into a plum with a sharpened quill. But castles are full of watchers, food tasters, nosy scullions, and let's not forget the hounds, ever eager to eat what's fallen from the table. One poor assassin tried to poison a roasted duck, only for the kitchen dog to devour it and drop dead mid-feast. The entire household panicked. and the assassin spent the next 2 days hiding in the laundry tower dressed as a nun. You can't always rely on kitchen access either. You might be forced to bribe a cook, which is dicey, because that cook might prefer 2 sacks of coin to rat you out. Or they might panic halfway and season the soup with something milder just in case. Now your target's mildly sleepy instead of, well, dead. Some assassins favored slow poisons, hoping to make the death seem natural. A few drops every day, slowly weakening the body. But again, dose control was laughable. You could end up killing your mark too fast, too slow, or just making them violently ill for a week and permanently suspicious of their servants. One infamous case tells of a noblewoman who survived multiple poisonings only to become so paranoid she ate nothing but dry oats and boiled water for the next 10 years. The assassin? Paid in advance, but reportedly haunted by guilt and hunger. And sometimes, your poisons just backfire. Literally. There's a half-believable account of an assassin who coated a wine jug's mouth with venom, only to forget and take a congratulatory swig himself after the deed. Another leaned in to blow powder into a sleeping duke's face and sneezed mid-inhale. Let's just say he didn't make it out either. A popular myth, though probably apocryphal, is that assassins would test poisons on condemned prisoners, or in some tales, on their own apprentices. Supposedly, the infamous Italian poisoner Tofana created a mixture that mimicked the symptoms of wasting disease. Whether she shared this secret with her clients or just let them bungle the recipe remains one of history's creepier mysteries. There's also the issue of antidotes. Your targets might carry one, or be dosed regularly with protective herbs by their overprotective mother, or that one oddly knowledgeable monk. Garlic, charcoal, vinegar, wormwood, any of them could counteract your mix, especially if the target was suspicious and halfway sober. That means all your careful brewing was for nothing, and now you're the one in danger. Some particularly bold assassins tried contact poisons, smearing door handles, bed linens, even rosary beads with irritants or toxins. These often worked until a servant or a small child touched the item first. One disturbing story recounts a bishop's cat dying from a poisoned pillow, prompting the bishop to sleep upright for the rest of his life. He lived another 22 years. And what about enchanted poisons? Oh yes, the belief in magic poisons ran strong. Some people thought you could curse wine by whispering a name over it 3 times. Others believed a silver cup would shatter if filled with tainted drink. Assassins had to work around superstition as much as science, and every household had its own quirky defense rituals, from hanging garlic to singing psalms over the stew pot. So every time you reach for that little pouch of dust, you're not just risking failure. You're stepping into a fog of unknowns. Will it kill quickly? Will it be traced? Will it affect the wrong person? Will your client be pleased or insulted that the death wasn't dignified enough? Because for all their flaws, nobles love drama, and nothing spoils their mood like a boring, bloated corpse. You start to miss the dagger. At least when you use that, you know who you're killing, and you can run. There's a reason you don't have a name anymore. Not a real one, at least. Maybe once, when you were younger and still had a family or a town to return to, you answered to something like Thomas or Ellen or Merrick with the limp. But now, you're whoever they need you to be. A traveling herbalist, a mute widow's cousin, a pious monk with unusually sharp handwriting, whatever it takes to blend in. Because for a medieval assassin, life is one long performance. Masks, myths, and double lives. Your greatest weapon isn't a dagger or poison. It's anonymity. Forget fame. You want to be forgettable. So you walk hunched. You cough at the right moments. You feign blindness to justify bumping into guards. Your clothes are tattered just enough to avoid suspicion, but not so filthy that dogs follow you hoping for scraps. You mimic voices, copy dialects, borrow names from headstones and missing persons lists. One week you're a Flemish pilgrim. The next, a mute Italian baker who lost everything in the fire. Which fire? Doesn't matter. No one wants to hear the whole story. That's the trick. You keep things vague. Let people fill in the gaps with whatever makes them feel superior. But keeping up the act is exhausting. You lie so much, you start to forget what's real. You stare at your reflection in a blacksmith's bucket and wonder which version of yourself you're seeing. Was your hair always that color? Did your accent change last week? Have you always had that scar? Or did you fake it one too many times, and now it's simply there? You start to invent details just to make the lies more believable. A dead sister named Lisette, a fondness for sour cherries, a lucky ribbon from a festival that never happened. The more real your lies become, the safer you are. Until someone recognizes you anyway. Historians still debate whether some assassins lived full double lives, raising families, running shops, even attending church, while sneaking off at night to fulfill contracts. There are legends of innkeepers who poisoned guests for gold, or midwives who used their access to quietly end a rival's bloodline. Are they myths? Maybe. But the truth is often more frightening. You can live in plain sight and still be entirely invisible. There's a fringe account of a court musician who was actually a killer for hire. He played the lute, sang ballads, and slipped notes under tapestries directing servants to prepare the red wine. That wine, of course, was poisoned. His music, supposedly calming. His final note, a blade hidden in the sound hole of his instrument. Sometimes you get hired specifically because of your ability to disappear into a crowd. A noble doesn't want a brawler. They want someone who can serve meat at a banquet, smile politely, and vanish before the guests realize one plate went untouched. You wear a servant's livery, bow at the right moment, and excuse yourself just before the scream. But your lies aren't just for strangers. You lie to your friends, if you still have any. You lie to the priest during confession. You lie to yourself in the quiet hours between jobs, whispering that you'll stop soon, that this was the last one, that you'll find a quiet village and become a beekeeper. And there's always the danger of believing your own cover story. You spend so long pretending to be someone else, it starts to feel easier, safer. Like maybe you could live this new life. Maybe you could be the humble candle seller with a stall near the cathedral. Maybe the woman who always buys your rosewater isn't just a mark, but a real person you could care about. And then the next contract comes in, and she's the target, and now you're back in the dark again. To make it worse, people love a good myth. Word spreads. Townsfolk whisper about a shadowy figure who appears whenever someone dies mysteriously. They give you names: the Black Thorn, the Candle Ghost, the Silent Raven. Some think you're a demon, Others think you're a curse. A few even want to hire you. That last part's the most dangerous, because the moment a legend attaches to your face, or even your shape, you're no longer safe. Someone sketches your silhouette. Someone else swears they saw a figure like you in Bruges or Calais or Paris. Soon, every suspicious death has your name stapled to it, even the ones you didn't do, especially the ones you didn't do. There's a chilling account in a 15th century chronicle of a man burned alive after being accused of assassination, a crime invented by a lord whose steward died mysteriously. No one proved the man's guilt. No one even knew his real name. But he happened to be new in town, quiet, left-handed. That was enough. So you start avoiding towns entirely. You sleep in ruined chapels, abandoned mills, caves filled with damp moss and the occasional bat. You disguise yourself as a wandering holy fool just to get a meal. You murmur nonsense, pretend to be cursed, and cross your eyes for effect. Sometimes, though, people see through it. A child stares at you too long. A guard squints as you pass. A beggar seems to recognize your boots. And suddenly, your double life is crumbling. You tighten your hood. You leave that town. You burn the name you've been using. You disappear again. Because being a medieval assassin means never being anyone for too long. Let's not pretend it always goes well. In fact, more often than not, the job goes sideways, backward, upside down, and then explodes in your face. When things go wrong, and they always do, there's no backup plan, no support team, no getaway horse tethered behind a hedge, just you, a bad decision, and the creeping realization that you may not make it out of this one. The door you thought was unguarded? Not tonight. The servant you bribed? Suddenly loyal again after a chat with the steward. The poison you slipped into the goblet? Poured out by a tipsy knight who wanted to toast properly and demanded fresh wine. It's always something stupid. You spent 2 weeks planning, and it all unravels because someone decided to stay up late polishing a candlestick. Sometimes the failure is your own fault. You trip. You cough at the wrong moment. You mix up rooms and strangle a chambermaid instead of a count. That happened once, according to a French letter from 1312. The assassin didn't even realize the mistake until he was halfway across the fields, and by then the whole castle was on alert. He spent the next 3 days buried under sheep dung, breathing through a straw. That's the glamorous life. When the plan fails, your options shrink fast. Do you run? Fight? Hide in a privy and hope no one's using it? You can't exactly talk your way out. Sorry, I got lost and accidentally broke into your master's chamber holding a blade. Honest mistake. It's not convincing. Historians still argue whether assassins ever carried forged papers or false seals to explain their presence if caught. If they did, it rarely worked. You're not nobility. You're not clergy. You don't even have a last name anymore. So when the guards find you standing over a nobleman's corpse, or worse, not quite a corpse yet, they don't ask questions. They raise the alarm. And then you run. You sprint down twisting corridors with tapestries billowing like sails, guards shouting behind you. If you're lucky, you remember the way out. If you're not, you end up in the buttery or the armory, neither of which are good hiding places, unless your escape plan involves slipping in pig fat or swinging an axe you barely know how to hold. There's a legend, almost certainly exaggerated, about an assassin who, in a panic, jumped from a castle tower into a pile of hay, survived, and escaped disguised as a stable boy. He was later arrested because he couldn't stop limping from the fall, and stable boys weren't supposed to look like they just landed on a wagon wheel. And if you don't escape, well, then it's torture time. Medieval nobles didn't just kill assassins, they showcased them. You might be flayed, boiled, broken on the wheel, or, in one famously awful case, stuffed into a barrel full of nails and rolled down a hill. That was apparently meant as a lesson to other sneaky bastards, as the record charmingly puts it. You might be interrogated too, but not with clever questions and stern glares. No, they'll stretch you on the rack until your joints pop like grapes. They'll clamp your legs in iron boots and pour boiling oil down the insides. They'll break your fingers one by one while reading psalms. You'll tell them everything, including things that never happened, and once they have what they want, or realize you never knew anything, they'll kill you anyway. Even when you escape, you often leave a trail. Blood on the floor, a broken latch, a servant who swears they saw a figure in the hallway. People talk, word spreads. Someone links your face to a name, or a name to a face, and then the bounty appears. Because nobles love a bounty. They slap it on posters. They whisper it to innkeepers. They offer land, titles, or horses with names like Stormcutter or Justice. And suddenly, every bored squire, hungry mercenary, and drunk hunter wants to bag themselves an assassin. Even worse, sometimes your own employer turns on you. You botched the job? They blame you. You succeeded but made a mess? They call it treason. You killed the wrong cousin? How dare you, says the same man who only told you. Make sure the old one dies, not the fat one. There's a chilling letter from a Bohemian lord who, after hiring a killer to take out a rival, decided to erase the trail by hiring a second killer to eliminate the first. That second killer later demanded triple payment because cleaning messes isn't in the original fee. Even other assassins aren't trustworthy. You might think you're working with a partner, someone you've known for years, shared bread with, even bled beside. But if things go south, they might turn on you, sell you out, blame you for the plan going wrong, or worst of all, leave you behind. There's no union, no loyalty, just a loose understanding that I won't kill you today if you don't kill me tomorrow. A truce that dissolves the moment silver enters the conversation. One tale, possibly apocryphal, describes two assassins sent to kill the same bishop. One tried poison, the other fire. Both attempts failed. The bishop, unharmed but furious, had them captured and made to fight to the death in the courtyard, so at least one man dies properly. The crowd reportedly cheered. And even if you survive all of this, if you kill the target, escape the scene, dodge the bounty, and silence every witness, you're still not safe. You're just a little more tired, a little more hunted, and a lot more paranoid. Because when things go wrong in your line of work, it's not just one bad night. It's the beginning of your end. You might imagine there's some kind of assassin honor code, a whispered oath, a secret guild, a tattoo that glows when another killer's nearby. Something, anything, that gives your line of work a shred of structure. But no, There's no creed, no brotherhood, no scroll with rules written in blood and bad Latin. The truth is far worse. The assassin's code, or lack thereof, is just chaos in a cloak. You don't get mentorship. You get mistrust. You don't get allies. You get rivals who'd gladly shove you off a parapet for half your coin purse. The only code is survival, and sometimes even that feels optional. Say you meet another assassin in a shadowed alley or atop a bell tower. Do you share information? Trade tips? Compare poison recipes? No. You circle each other like wild dogs, hands near hilts, wondering if the other's been paid to slit your throat instead. Maybe you nod. Maybe you lie. Maybe you pretend you're just a very intense chimney sweep, but you never trust them. Because next week, you might be on opposite ends of the same contract. Historians still debate whether medieval assassins ever formed true networks, or if that's just legend. There are hints, clusters of killings that seem too coordinated, messages passed in coded symbols, a certain glyph carved into the base of a well in Marseille. But there's no solid proof of a guild, just fragments and fear, which, to be fair, is most of your life. And don't expect gratitude if you try to help a fellow killer. One story tells of two assassins who both targeted the same bishop. One arrived late and found the other waiting at the scene, dagger already slick. The second killer offered to help dispose of the body. The first smiled, thanked him, and then slit his throat for spoiling the ambiance. Because competition is everywhere, and in your line of work, you don't get second chances. You botch one job, and word gets out. Sloppy. Hesitates. Talks too much. You'll be lucky to get hired to drown a kitten, let alone murder a noble. So assassins keep to themselves. They carve messages into barn beams. They use street performers to pass signals. They bury coins in certain patterns, 3 silver, 1 copper, arranged like a cross, for other killers to find and interpret. And if you misread the sign, if you think you're picking up a message when it's really a warning, well, let's hope you run faster than they throw knives. Then there are the fake rules. The unspoken agreements people whisper about, but never actually follow. Like, never kill a priest. That's adorable. Plenty of priests end up on noble hit lists, especially the ones who gossip or hold too many secrets. Or, no killing on holy days. Tell that to the assassin who garroted a count during Easter Mass, mid-hymn. He supposedly timed it so the congregation's final amen drowned out the snap of the neck. There's a fringe belief that some killers did follow a personal code. Maybe you won't harm children. Maybe you leave coins at the feet of the dead. Maybe you light a candle after each job. But the job itself? No rules. And if someone else comes along without those scruples, well, guess who's finishing the job faster? Worse still are the tests. Occasionally, a noble might hire 2 assassins for the same job, just to see who gets it done first. Or better, or more quietly. You're being judged like a roast at a feast. This one was efficient, but left too much blood. The other one arranged the body quite artistically. If you're lucky, they hire you again. If you're unlucky, you become the next test subject. It's exhausting. You're not just watching the guards or the dogs. You're watching everyone. The kid playing dice by the gate. The baker's apprentice who lingers too long near your room. The the traveling pilgrim who never removes his gloves. Any of them might be here for the same reason you are, or for you. And if you ever do manage to meet someone you trust, even briefly, don't expect it to last. One evening, you share wine. The next, you share a target. And by dawn, you're sharing a grave. There's no retirement plan for two. There's barely one for one. One unsettling chronicle tells of a female assassin known only as Mira. She worked alone, but kept a habit of leaving small gifts, rings, coins, bits of cloth, at the scenes of her jobs, not out of sentiment, but as a warning. I was here. I'm better than you. No one ever saw her face, but plenty claim to have worked near her, or almost with her. Those people usually ended up dead too. So what keeps you in the game? Desperation, blackmail, revenge, or maybe, just maybe, the sheer thrill of being a ghost in a world of shouting men, of watching from the shadows as lords toast your accidental death with smug, clueless smiles. But it wears on you, always looking over your shoulder, always sleeping with one eye open, one blade close. You can't even relax at a tavern without mapping the exits and checking for poisoned ale. Someone bumps into you and your heart jumps, not from fear, but from reflex. Because in your world, everyone bumps on purpose. And sometimes you wonder, what if you'd refused that first job? What if you'd taken the path of the butcher, or the tanner, or the cooper with the terrible singing voice? You could have been someone instead of this, but the answer always comes. They'd have found you anyway. The nobles, the other assassins, the whispers. The game would have swallowed you one way or another. So you keep your mask on, you sharpen your blade, and you trust no one, especially the ones who claim they follow a code. It always ends the same. Whether you're the best blade from Burgundy, or some gutter-born ghost who clawed their way up by sheer spite and silence, the finish line in this business is never golden. It's not triumph or legacy. It's not peace or even pay. It's just disappearance. Because in the end, you either die young or vanish forever. You wake one day in a cold barn, older than you feel, joints stiff, eyes dull. Your cloak still smells like damp earth and something coppery. You hear a bird cry and flinch like it's a crossbow bolt. It's been years since you last saw the face of someone who wasn't terrified or planning to betray you. You're not even sure what name you used last. Was it Jacob? Thomas? That woman who claimed to be a weaver's widow and knew how to gut a man with sewing shears? You think maybe you can get out. One last job, one last pile of coin, and then a cart to the coast, a ship to somewhere warm. You'll grow olives, you'll keep bees, maybe take up painting, something peaceful, something quiet. But you won't, because you're already on a dozen lists, real and imagined. You're already blamed for 10 deaths you didn't commit, and 50 you did. Someone saw you in Prague. Someone else swears you were in Ghent last winter, and that boy you let live during a job 3 years ago, he's grown now, and furious. Historians still argue whether any assassin ever retired and lived a normal life. A few stories say yes. A woman who ran an herb stall in Seville, a one-eyed man who faked his death and joined a monastery in Wales. But there's no proof, no grave markers, no journals, just speculation and shadow. And honestly, you suspect the ones who vanished didn't retire. They were erased, because no one wants a retired assassin roaming free. Not your clients, not your rivals, not the peasants who whisper your myth by firelight. You're a liability, a loose end, a ghost with too much memory and too many secrets. Even if you make it to the coast, to that warm little village where the waves sigh and no one asks questions, your hands still remember. You flinch at sudden noises. You never sit with your back to the door. You accidentally carry a knife in your boot when you go to buy figs. And that's assuming you survive long enough to run, because plenty don't. You die in an alley, or a stable, or a noble's garden with your spine bent at the wrong angle. Maybe a guard gets lucky. Maybe a dog smells you coming. Maybe your knee finally gives out mid-climb and you fall with a sickening snap. That's it. No last words. No funeral. Just a shallow grave behind a shed. Or no grave at all. Your employer might lie and say you were never hired. The local steward might claim you were a thief. The only one who really knows what you did is gone, along with your name, your story, your face. Maybe they hang someone else in your place. Maybe they don't bother at all. And if, by some miracle, you are remembered, it's only in rumors. They don't say your name. They call you the quiet one, or the ghost with the green eyes. Children dare each other to say your name 3 times in the mirror. Tavern tales twist your life into legend. They say you could leap across rooftops, that you drank snake venom to build immunity, that you whispered prayers for your victims just before cutting their throats. The truth? You were tired. You were hungry. You were terrified every single day. And now? You're gone. No songs, no statues, just silence, just shadow, just a warning tucked into the folds of history. Don't be the blade, because no one remembers the assassin. They only remember the blood. And now, breathe. Let the shadows of stone corridors fade. Let the torchlight dim. Let that poisoned goblet and the creaking castle floors dissolve into stillness. You've made it through the twisted, restless world of a medieval assassin. Through the lies, the fear, the grim humor that kept you company when nothing else would. Your heartbeat slows. The dagger drops from your thoughts. The chase, the whispers, the endless masks. They all blur now like fog slipping off a cold morning field. You're no longer hiding in the reeds or ducking behind a crumbling wall. You're here, safe, somewhere soft, quiet, and warm. There's no contract to fulfill, no watchful eyes, no names left to remember. Just a gentle hum in the background, maybe the breeze, maybe a fan. Maybe your own breath, rising and falling with the weightlessness of sleep. Tonight, no one is following. No one is watching. The only footsteps you hear are the ones in stories, long past, echoing in time, but never reaching you. Let your hands unclench. Let your eyes drift shut. Whatever you were, whoever you had to be, there's none of that now. Just rest. Tomorrow is far away, and for tonight, there are no more shadows, only sleep.